Hey now folks, my name is Nick, and today we're taking a look at the game Dungeon Guilds from MOA Ideas. It's a Taiwanese company, and in the interest of full disclosure, the publisher sent me a copy of the game for the express purpose of reviewing it, but that doesn't have any influence upon my opinion whatsoever. I will give you my honest and full review at the end of this video. Now, in Dungeon Guilds, each player is taking control of a group of adventurers, which are represented by different numbered cards, and you're trying to go through the different levels of a dungeon, and each dungeon has a dungeon master. I wonder where they got that idea from. That is actually, you're not actually going to fight that dungeon master, but it's going to have an influence over the dungeon and change things up. And every round, you're going to have a different dungeon master, different set of levels, and you have to try and take out those levels together, but really you're in it for yourself. You're trying to get as much gold as you can to win the game at the end of several rounds. So this game actually sounds very, very, very similar to another game that I own and enjoy, even though the designers said they have never actually played the game before. Which game is it? I won't tell you until after the break. Dungeon Guilds is for 3 to 6 players, and the goal is to have the most money, which is this stuff over here in different denominations, 1s, 5s, and 10s, at the end of the game. Now, the number of rounds in the game is determined by the number of players, essentially. So it's a minimum of 3 players, so you're going to do a minimum of 3 rounds, up to possibly 6 rounds. There is a start player token, and the way that turns are determined in this game, whoever is the start player, the turns are going to go clockwise around the table, and then it's going to snake back, meaning that you're going to go all the way around to the last player in turn order. The last player in turn order will take his turn, and then that player will take another turn, and then things are going to snake back counterclockwise back to the first player until everyone's taken their actions. And what actions are there, and what exactly are you trying to do? Well, essentially, every round, you are going to field a team of adventurers trying to go through the levels of a dungeon. Now, there are different adventurer cards for each of the different colors. They all have the same value, but they do have, and all the other numbers, but they do have different artwork. And I only now just noticed, as I was getting ready to film this review, that every single character depicted on these cards, aside from being chibi anime characters, are all girls. I never noticed that before, but anyways, what you're going to do is whatever your color you choose, you're going to take that set of adventurers. And now the breakdown of the card, aside from the artwork, is the value of the adventurers, basically how strong they are. You go from 1 to 5. And then in the other corner, you have a healing cost. Now, the healing cost is if you are in a failed level of the dungeon, you're going to have to pay this cost after the dungeon is failed. But at the very beginning of the game, what you're actually going to do, every player will start with $2 from the bank, but what you're going to do is choose 2 of these adventurers in the first round to be disabled. Now, whichever 2 adventurers you choose to disable, you're going to get the healing cost back in money at the beginning. So you're actually starting the game with some money. However, it can be kind of risky because you may want to get a lot of money by playing your 5 and your 4 and disabling them, but then you're at a disadvantage for the first round because you only have your weaker adventurers. So you have to come to that decision. But regardless, you will have 3 adventurers to start off with. And for the actual setup of the game, first off, the number of rounds is determined by the number of dungeon masters, again, according to the number of players. The dungeon masters have a special effect on the dungeon, and it's all different. So you'll choose randomly without looking at them however many you're going to actually use for the dungeon. So let's say that we're doing a 4-player game, so I'll take 2 out. And then you will also, now you'll use the entire deck of dungeon level cards, but you will shuffle them up. And you will deal a number out equal to the number of players. So you'll keep them face down so you can only see the back of the card. And again, let's say that we're doing a 4-player game. Once you've drawn them all out, you'll put them in order according to the stars on the back. So lowest level first, going down from the start here. So in this case, we have 2 level 2 rooms and 2 level 3 rooms. Then you're actually going to draw and put face up one of the dungeon masters at the head of the dungeon. Now, you're never going to fight the dungeon master, but basically they have an effect on the entire dungeon every time you play them. So let's actually take a look at those. Everything in this game is iconography in order to make it more language friendly. So we have the Beholder, and what the Beholder does is he says that the first room of the dungeon is worth 3 more treasure. The Red Dragon says that the last room of the dungeon is worth plus 10 treasure. The Vampire Lord says that the first 2 rooms of the dungeon are worth plus 2 treasure. The Guardian says that you cannot, for level 4 and level 5 adventurers, their healing costs are plus 2. The Succubus bans everyone. Ooh la la. Hello, nurse. No, the Succubus bans everyone from playing level 1 adventurers. And the Lich King says that the second level of the dungeon has plus 3 treasure, but also plus 2 defense. So you'll draw one of these at random, and that will be your dungeon master for the round. Now, what does all this other stuff mean on the dungeon cards? Like I said, at the beginning, these will always be kept face down. And on the face down part of the card, you have 3 stats. You have the level of the dungeon, and then these symbols are defense and treasure, and these are the ranges of their defense and treasure. So the defense for this room is anywhere from 3 to 7, and the treasure is anywhere from 6 to 10, but you won't know that exact number until everyone has placed their adventurers and it's time to actually delve into the dungeon. So, in turn order, everyone, starting with the first player again and snaking backwards, each player is going to play one of their adventurers. When you decide to play an adventure, you're going to, and you must play an adventure each turn, you are going to choose one, whichever one you want, and you'll place it face up next to a dungeon room. Now, on your turn, if you've already placed 2 adventurers, you must pass. But it is possible that you'll get an adventurer back, in which case, if it comes back around to your turn, you're going to have to play another adventurer. Basically, you're going to keep either playing or passing until everyone has 2 adventurers out, and that will signal the end of the round. Now, each dungeon level has room for 2 adventurers. Once there are 2 there, no other adventurer can be placed there unless you're trying to bump them, which I'll get back to in a second. The ultimate goal here is that you want to try to get as much strength on a room as possible, because you don't know what the exact defense on the other side of the card is, but the higher the better. And in fact, if the number of adventurers from any players can equal or exceed the maximum strength on the range on the back of the dungeon level card, it will lock that room. Nothing else can be done to that room. No one can bump another adventurer at all. That room is locked, and you're going to have to deal with whatever happens on the other side. Now, assuming that the room is not locked, even if there are already 2 adventurers there, then you can try to bump out another player. So let's say I placed my guy there, and that was a level 2 hero. So the green player can go ahead and bump me by putting bad example. Let's say that there's level 2 hero there as well. So there's 2 heroes there. Technically, you can't put another one there, but the green player can place let's say level 4 and bump either player of his choice. Now, when you do that, it's not without consequence. You actually have to pay a fee to the player that you're bumping, and possibly a fee to the bank as well, depending on the level of the dungeon. The penalty is stiffer as you go down, but it may be worth it to you if you're trying to really get in on that room before it pops. Now, the thing about it is this. At the end, after everyone has played their heroes, everyone's got 2 heroes down somewhere, somehow, you're going to start from the beginning and work your way down, flipping over the dungeon cards and actually seeing whether you succeeded at taking out the dungeon level. So now that we've got one flipped over, let's take a look at it. In this room, you have a salamander monster. So you saw that the range of the defense was 3 to 7. This is actually the maximum amount on that range. So it's a 7 defense, and it gives you 10 treasure, which is also the maximum. So once you flip over, you check to see if the total strength value of the heroes, no matter which player played them, equals or exceeds that strength. In this case, it did not. Now, let's just say theoretically that it did. In that case, you will split the heroes the people that played heroes there will split up the treasure. If assuming that it's an even number, whoever the players are, let's the red and blue player here, you will evenly split that money. So each player gets 5 coins. But if you're the only person that played adventurers on that room, you will get all of the money. If it's an uneven number, then the remainder goes to the player who played the strongest adventurer on that dungeon level. And if that's still a tie, then no one gets the remainder. Now, in this example, however, we failed this room. What happens when you fail the room? That means that every other layer of the dungeon also fails. Now, if this had been the last room in the dungeon that failed, no big deal. All of the other rooms, if they successfully succeeded, are still fine. However, because if one higher up fails, all the rest below it will fail, you'll immediately stop resolving the rooms. And when a dungeon level fails, not only do you not get the treasure for it, but the adventurers that are placed there come back to you and you have to pay their healing costs from your coin/victory point pile. So in this case, if this failed, the blue and the red player would each have to pay 1 coin to the bank, which means it's less likely that they're going to win at the end of the game. Any failed rooms immediately get discarded, and you are not allowed to look at what was on the other side in order to give a little bit more randomness, because now you don't know exactly which rooms have been played. At the start of a new round, you will also discard the Dungeon Master, draw a new one, and draw more rooms equal to the number of players. Now, the other thing that happens is the adventurers that you get back that were on the adventure, in addition to possibly having to pay their healing costs if they were in failed rooms, are disabled. And any adventurers that were previously disabled, either from it being the first round disabling or from future rounds, you take back into your hand, which means you always have a new party of 3 adventurers to choose from. And play is going to continue like this until you run out of Dungeon Masters, which means you're out of rounds. Whoever has the most victory points is the winner. So one last thing I want to mention is that I'm not sure that every copy of the game is going to include these, but the copy that I have also had promotional characters, which actually depicts little very bizarre cartoonish drawings of some of the people that the game designers and publisher know in the gaming industry in Taiwan. So they function the same way as the regular Dungeon Master, so it just adds a little more variety. So, for instance, the Naughty Kid says that rooms that have adventurers of the same strength get +3 treasure in the resolution phase. The Caveman says that when at the beginning of the dungeon level where you have to face off against the Caveman, all players disable the strength 1 and 2 adventurers and make the 3, 4, and 5 adventurers available right away. The Big Fun King says that the last room in the dungeon has +3 defense and +5 treasure. The Hello Duck says that the last 2 levels each get +4 treasure. And the Board Game Lord says that the players with the lowest combined strength of place adventurers in this dungeon receive $3 at the start of the resolution phase. So what does Dungeon Guilds remind me of? Well, that would be this game, Dragon's Gold. Now, in both games, each player has a team of adventurers represented by different numbered cards that you're going to be... In Dragon's Gold, you're putting those adventurers down next to actual dragons, which you have to meet or beat a certain number, then the dragon dies and a bunch of treasure drops out, and then you have to immediately negotiate over the treasure and split it up and keep your treasure secret, and then at the end of the game, whoever has the most is the winner. It's more complicated than that, but Dungeon Guilds felt very, very similar in that regard. You're putting the adventurers down next to a particular dungeon level and trying to meet a threshold, and then if you meet the threshold, you'll get coins. But it's handled in a much different way, and I have to tell you, I think I like Dungeon Guilds better. Now, the thing is, I like Dragon's Gold. Eventually, I'll review it, and you'll find that out, but the problem with it is that for what it is, which is effectively a light sort of take that negotiation game, it's just too long. I've played Dragon's Gold several times now, and it should be like an hour-long game, and it ends up always being 2 hours, depending on the number of players, or somewhere around there. And that's just too long for what it is. It's too light to be that long. It just kind of drags at a certain point. The excitement sort of wears down. Dungeon Guild is much lighter and faster than that, and I really appreciate that. It's still the same mechanisms, but a couple of things that I like that are different. I like the different dungeon masters that come out every round, and I have to be honest, I don't know if every version of this game, especially if it gets reprinted in the US, is going to have those promotional cards that came boxed in with mine. But regardless, even with just the base set of Dungeon Masters, it adds a bit of variety. I mean, it's nice knowing that, or it's nice not knowing what the dungeons are actually going to entail, if some dungeon rooms are going to be worth less coins, if certain adventurers can't be played. I like that idea. And here's what's really interesting about this game to me, and that is the idea that you need to work together to go through these rooms, But if a room that's higher up the ladder of dungeon levels, if it fails, if the adventurers there fail to defeat a room, then the rest of them fail as well. What this leads to is some very tense and very annoying and frustrating parts of the game where some players can just tank a room expressly for the purpose of gypping the other players out of gold. And you would do this either because you know someone's ahead, maybe you know that you're not going to win, but you're taking someone down with you, or maybe because it's a turn where you don't have your best adventurers, you don't think you really have a shot at getting something good, so to hell with it. Tank the entire dungeon for the rest of the players. I mean, and then that really can hurt someone, especially if they have to pay the healing cost for a very high-level adventurer. So that's cool. That whole healing cost thing, too, leads to some interesting decision-making as far as, can I take this adventurer with someone low, but, should I guarantee it? Should I lock it in and choose one of my high-level adventurers? But then if something goes horribly awry, if someone at a higher level tanks the whole dungeon, then I'm going to have to pay these healing costs, which means I'm less likely to win because coins or victory points. It's very annoying and frustrating when you're on the receiving end, but it led to some very interesting back and forth. And in other words, there's a lot of player interaction in this game, and that's what I like. And that's not to say that a game like Dragon's Gold didn't have that, but again, that game was just a little too long, a little too complex for it to be a perfect game for me. And I'm not saying Dungeon Guilds is a perfect game. I mean, it's very light. And I'm not sure how I feel about the whole snaking mechanism where you go around and then it goes back to that player gets 2 turns, and then you go back around. I do think that you didn't have to make it that complicated. I think it could have been like Dragon's Gold where every player just goes around and plays an adventurer. But nevertheless, I think that for what this is, a light card game, it's very cool. It's got a lot of cool player interaction. I like the components. I like the artwork. If you're not into chibi anime, which a lot of the players in my game weren't, then that could bother you. But I like it personally. Obviously, look at my shirt. But not that these are chibi anime. But but anyways, I don't know. Cool light game. I hope that it gets an English publisher, or even just a European publisher, so that it becomes more widely available, because it's a neat game, and I hope to see more from this company. So that is Dungeon Guilds from MOA Ideas. My name is Nick, and I'm reminding you to get out there and game every day in every way. Take care.